You can go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 25. We told you about 6 parables that we've been covering in regards to rewards in heaven, 3 of which the penalty or the result or the end of the parable had to do being cast in an outer darkness, referring to outside the camp, into a furnace of fire or being cut into pieces. Then there were 3, 2 of which we've already covered, the last of which we get into tonight. And the result is outside the gate, because there's no mention of a furnace of fire. It is that relative outer darkness that we've been discussing. So in Matthew chapter 25, we find the parable of the talents. And I absolutely love this parable because it is absolutely loaded with so much for us to pull out of and draw from. So as we begin, let me ask you the age-old question that everybody knows the answer to. You only have to answer with 2 words, okay? Because everybody knows the answer to it. What is grace? Okay, thank you. Unmerited favor. All right, now take a moment and think about that. Unmerited favor is what grace is called, right? Well, if grace is unmerited favor, then favor is otherwise merited. Just like unleaded gasoline is otherwise leaded. So what is favor? Preferential treatment. Privileged treatment. We call it favoritism. Faith pleases God. That's the basis we've been talking about in Hebrews 11:6. So when we operate in faith, it gets noticed. The mistopodotus, the rewarder, issues preferential treatment to those who catch his eye because of their faith. As we see with the centurion, he stopped him in his tracks. The highest level of faith that he received. Even the woman with the issue of blood. He felt virtue flow from him and he turned around and said, "Who touched me?" But I truly believe that he sensed faith immediately. The time he saw her, he saw faith. So as a result, you find favor when we respond in faith. Jesus, it says in Luke, that he increased in favor with both God and man. Now we understand how he would need to grow in favor with man, but it says he grew in favor with God. So as he did things pleasing to the Lord, obviously the Lord in turn just blesses him like he does us. Well, in Matthew chapter 25, beginning in verse 14, it says, "For it is just like a man," talking about the kingdom, "about to go on a journey, who called his own slaves or servants and entrusted his possessions to them." Do you notice the emphasis there? He entrusted his possessions. Whose possessions? His possessions. Okay, that's important. Because he's about to go on a journey. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his own ability, and he went on his journey. You notice that each servant was not given the same amount of money. Likewise, we are not initially given the same amount of favor. All men are created equal. That's not a verse in the Bible. People may swear up and down it is, but it ain't. It's true in terms of God's love for us. He loves us all one and the same, but not necessarily with his favor. Grace is unmerited favor, so favor is otherwise merited. It says in Matthew 25:15, it says he gave each according to his own ability. Now that word ability is dunamis, his own power, but it's what we need to get to is this. Let me rephrase it to help you understand. He gave them the talents according to their previously demonstrated ability to handle them. See, we work our way up in the kingdom. These ones to whom he called, are these the only servants that he had? It doesn't say, but he surely had more. But he called these three. And he gave these three preferential treatment. He left his possessions. It says he entrusted them. You want to know how much God trusts you? Well, consider how much he's entrusted to you. So these were three, arguably, his most trusted employees. He calls them together and he distributes 5, 2, and 1, and he gave it according to their previously demonstrated ability to handle it. What we're discussing tonight is biblical stewardship as the basis for reward in heaven. Biblical stewardship. Now, when you hear the word stewardship, the root of that is the word steward. What is a steward? We always talk about it in terms of tithing and giving, and we're supposed to be good stewards, and that's true. But in the Greek, it is oikonomos. Oikos, it means house. Nosos means rule of law. So he's the rule of the house. He's the one who rules the house. In Greek culture, it was a household manager of a wealthy upper class home. The best way I can describe it to relate to us, as Jesus would if he was sitting here, he would use a modern day illustration for you to be able to understand clearly what he's talking about. So the ideal example of a steward is Alfred the butler in all the Batman movies. He's a steward. He ran the house. Now, don't think for a minute that a steward was one who he went through a list of resumes and he hired the steward with the most qualifications. Back in that day, you worked your way up. This man may have started working for him when he was a young fella, just as you've had those who've worked for you fresh out of high school, and they've been with you for years. So you know what I'm talking about here. So now you can entrust things to them because they've been with you all this time. So he would notice how reliable this guy is. I gave him a task, he does it. I gave him more responsibility, he did it. So each time you've given some and you're faithful with it, you're rewarded with more. So he had worked his way up to this powerful ruling position as chief manager of all his private affairs, as was Joseph. Remember Joseph? He was accountable for overseeing the house itself, the contents of the house, the gardens, any possessions, including any assets and treasures. He was also responsible for distributing wages on time to the servants. So that right there tells you there were other servants, because he's in charge of paying other servants. To give so much trust and responsibility to one person, it demanded one be faithful. You are not going to give this much responsibility to someone who isn't faithful. So he calls these three whom he's going to entrust his possessions with. Now, as we go through this parable, rather than wait and tell you, I'll go ahead and tell you right now. The definition of stewardship management, as defined according to this parable in particular, but you see it throughout the Bible, and we're going to show you other instances of where this comes into play. But what is biblical stewardship? Here it is. You ready? It's the timely, effective, and efficient use of what you know to be another one's resources. That's A. There's A, B, and C to this definition. Part A is the timely, effective, and efficient use of what you know to be another man's resources. How many in here have ever driven a company car? Okay? A company car. All right, now, that's part A. You were responsible and you were trusted, and you knew all along that's not your vehicle. You don't pay the insurance on it. You don't pay the payment on it. You don't pay the taxes on it. That's not your ride. That belongs to the boss. That belongs to someone else. So you're supposed to use it in a timely manner. You're supposed to use it in an effective manner. You're supposed to use it in an efficient manner. B, definition of stewardship management. A is the timely, effective, efficient use of what you already acknowledge to be another man's resources. B, for the sole express purpose for which you understood from the get-go it was given. You understand when you were entrusted with it, you were given it for a purpose. For the 18 years, the entire 18 years I served as principal of Agape Christian Academy, I had a company vehicle. I drove a company car. And it was bestowed and entrusted to me for the express purpose of getting me to and from Hampton to Lebico. Lebico to Hampton. Hampton to Lebico, Lebico to Hampton. Now, I was given the opportunity if I was going to church or whatever else, or besides there, if I was going to a revival or I'm going, doing other things, go to the grocery store, yeah, that's fine. But you get the point. I understood that it was given to me for this purpose. Okay? So A, the timely, effective, efficient use of what you know from the get-go to be another man's resources. B, for the sole express purpose for which it was given to you. And C, with the understood intent to produce the all along expected added value back to the resource to present to the owner upon return. You've been given it, you've been entrusted with it, so you can do something with it. So upon return, you can show me where you used it for the express purpose, and there is something to show for it in return. You did something with it. Okay? Increase, even multiplication is expected. God expects at the very least increase. Ideally, multiplication with whatever we've been entrusted with. Now, if I may, without hymn books being thrown at me, who exemplifies this part C of the definition? Who exemplifies this just naturally? A woman does. Not being chauvinistic or anything, but a woman does. Okay? Let me give you some examples. We've used it before, perhaps. You give a woman a sperm, she's going to give you back a baby that she carried for 9 months. Again, not being chauvinistic, but you give a woman a sack of groceries and you go get a delicious meal. She's going to take those ingredients and she's going to give it the expected added value and present it back to the family. Not just you, but the whole family on the table. So what you give a woman, it is her natural gifting to be able to do something with it. And when she gives it back to you, it's going to be with increase. Whatever you gave her is going to be returned to you with increase. That is a remarkable character trait of you women, that y'all are naturally gifted in doing that. And I just named a few. Of course, you could also think in terms of you give a woman HE double hockey sticks and she's going to give it right back to you too. With increase. Exactly. So, you got to be careful. So that's a life lesson for us men learn tonight. Okay? Verse 16. Immediately the one who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and gained 5 more talents. In the same manner. Okay, that's important. You can breeze through that. In the same manner. What is the significance of that? Because it says, in the same manner, the one who had received the 2 talents gained 2 more. The one with the 5 went and traded his 5. The one with the 2 went and traded his 2. And did so in the same manner. In other words, you're not looking jealously at what another has been entrusted with as opposed to you. Someone else has been entrusted with 5. I've only been entrusted with 2. You don't get off into jealousy. You don't get off into complaining and griping back to the owner and say, hey, how come you gave them 5 and only gave me 2? Well, were you not listening? I gave each according to your previously demonstrated ability, he's going to tell them. But the point is this. The one who's given 2 is content and will go and will work just as hard doing the exact same thing as the one with 5 does. So the one who is gifted in a certain area, more so than another, it doesn't mean that the one with more the one with less has to work less than the one with more. The one being entrusted initially with less, and to me, should be all the more determined to work harder than the one with the 5. It says, in the same manner, he went and traded. That word traded is ergazomai. It's engaging in work. It's labor with implication of producing, accomplishing, just as a craftsman. Just as a craftsman. Just like my dad. I went up out there yesterday to check on him. The truck was backed up to the shed, and in the back was decking boards and 2x6s and 2x4s. Okay? That's what goes into the shop. What comes out is Adirondack chairs, swing sets, and rocking chairs. That's what comes out. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether you're giving 2 talents or 5 talents, you're still going to go to work with what you got. Okay? Ezekiel 28:16 says, this is exactly what Lucifer did in heaven prior to his fall. By the abundance of your trading, in the midst of your trading, not that he was going out buying and selling, but he was just ministering about what he was gifted to do. He was in charge of the culture of heaven. Okay? So he just ministered it about until pride came in the door. Okay? Likewise, we put favor to work. Any favor bestowed to us, we've got to put it to work. That's exactly what Solomon did. Solomon was given favor. Okay? And if I may get ahead of myself, the Queen of Sheba pointed out to Solomon, she says, oh my, the favor that's been bestowed upon you, young man. I'm paraphrasing. And she says, you've been given this favor because of God's love for Israel. In other words, the favor that you're being given is not for you. It's for you to trade it and minister it about for the benefit of those under your influence. So any favor you have, Any leadership position, any favor, any gifts, any talents, anything that you've been given favorably, it's because of His love for those who are going to benefit from it. And we need to understand, it's not like, okay, I just need to keep it all to myself. No, you've been graciously gifted with favor in a certain area. We're supposed to minister it about. Just as 5 talents, just as 2 talents. Those who know how money works knows how to work with money. Those who learn how favor works will know how to steward favor. Faithfulness is always rewarded, but we must understand its contextual definition here in the parable. If you hear the word faithful, you're going to think longevity. You're going to think how long our secretary has been faithfully serving as secretary. You're going to think how long our organist and pianist have been faithfully serving in those areas. We will think in terms of longevity as in a tenure. But the contextual definition of faithfulness here is stewardship of what you understand belongs to another. How well you steward what belongs to another. Now see, that's kingdom. Because the kingdom is based on 2 fundamental principles. 1, it all belongs to the king. 2, we have full access. So everything that we call ours, technically in this democratic society, my house, my truck, my car, everything we call mine technically is not ours, it all belongs to Him. And the sooner we acknowledge that, because it says in Deuteronomy 8:18, it is He who gives you the power to get wealth, to buy those things. Okay? That's His vehicle you drive. It all belongs to the King. And the sooner you realize that, I just got finished, sorry if I get on a tangent, because I just got finished preaching this the last couple of nights at Revival at Deep Branch. Okay? And we shared it here before too. That the moment that younger prodigal said, give me what's mine, and took his inheritance into the world's value system, you subject it to the economic conditions of the world's value system. If you keep it under the kingdom's value system, it multiplies. Just like money in the bank, it accrues with interest. But the moment you take it out, it's now subject to economic conditions. Being taxed for one, being spent another. It's what we understand doesn't belong to us. To the good stewards of the 5 and 2, his master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. Good is agathos. It's inherently good. It's what originates from God, but is empowered to work through us by faith. Goodness. You will notice this phrase. If you don't believe me, look it up. Go back and try to find it elsewhere. This phrase, well done, good and faithful servant. This is the only time this phrase is used. And it's in the context of stewardship. So we talk about it when it comes to going to heaven and rewards in heaven. And we want to hear Him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Do we realize that the context with which He deliberately spoke it, and the only context with which He spoke it, is how well we steward that which we are entrusted with, namely money. That's a good tithing and giving sermon right there. It says, you were faithful with a few things, I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, this is a Bible study, and as often as it turns into me talking 99.9% of the hour, I don't mind getting some feedback here, okay? Because I'm sure what you have to say is good, and it's not that what I'm saying is going to one-up you. No, don't feel that way. But what I have to say, I want to hear what you have to say. Because a lot of times what you have to say is better than what I have to say. So let me ask you. It says, enter into the joy of your master. Well, who's the master? Jesus. Okay? All right. Well, in Hebrews 12:2, it says, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. What was the joy set before Jesus? That's a very good point. He even indicated so, not braggingly, but in prayer to the Father. If you read John 17, that's the prayer of John 17. I have, in essence, been faithful with these disciples you've given me. I have poured myself into them. So yeah, you're right. Anyone else? What was the joy set before Jesus? Now, what I have to say is my own angle from it. That's why I'm saying it's not one-upping anybody. It's just as valuable to what you just said. Okay? Because we all can see it, and it's probably many things. So what you see is one of the many things. What I see is one of the many things. So what is the joy set before Jesus? Well, obviously, when we say he came to die on the cross, and that's good, that's true, you're right. But the cross was a means to the end. Right. The cross was a means to the end. The cross was simply the price I've got to pay to get back what man lost, what Adam forfeited in the garden. Right. It was mentioned off camera that he says on 2 occasions, he says, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Now, when did he say that? He said it at his baptism, after he came up out of the waters. Okay? It says, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. Where was that at? The Jordan River. 1,500 feet below sea level. Where else did he say that? On the Mount of Transfiguration, Mount Hermon. 9,200 and some change feet above sea level. Almost 10,000 feet above sea level. On the Mount of Transfiguration, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. At the lowest point in the earth, at the highest elevation of the earth, from the lowest to the highest, he declared, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. So what Jesus did pleased him. And what did he get in return? Seated at the right hand of the Father, the name above every other name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee must bow. The name of Jesus is the greatest name of any person, any creature, anything, any word in the vocabulary. The name Jesus is greater than any other name. Okay? Well, we could argue that that the reason he came was to destroy the works of the devil, to loosen the works of the devil. 1 John 3:8. We could say he came to preach the gospel of the kingdom. Luke 4:43, he says, I must go and preach the gospel of the kingdom to other towns and cities and villages also, for I was sent for this purpose. He gave his mission statement right there. We could say, ideally, as he reveals in John 14, he came to reveal the Father. So he came for a lot of reasons. And of course, the cross was a means to the end. To do what? To restore to us what Adam lost. So, his joy is all of this that we've mentioned, is for his people to be living in the kingdom, operating in the kingdom, wielding dominion over their circumstances, living full of peace, living full of joy, living in divine health, as you pointed out. That's what he wants. And the cross, as you pointed out, provided it all. The cross was the price that had to be paid for us to be able to enjoy the benefits. So when you remember the old song, when he was on the cross, I was on his mind? When he was on the cross, I was on his mind. 2,000 years later, I was on his mind. You were on his mind. The point I'm trying to get to is this, as we get back to this. Obviously, as we'll get to in just a moment, before we finish up for tonight and stop for tonight, We won't finish this tonight because there's too much in it. Obviously, what he gave him in a talent was a sum of money. We'll get to that in just a moment. But in terms of that, and in the context of, well done, thou good and faithful servant, the only time he mentions it is in this contextual definition of how well you steward that which has been entrusted to you, period. For instance, money. Maybe top of the list, money. But there are other things that he's entrusted to us. Well, when we get to heaven, Jesus is not going to ask, how much money did you make? He's not going to ask, what position were you at when you died? Manager? Supervisor? What rank were you? He's going to ask, did you fulfill your purpose? Because life is measured by purpose. Do you realize God's not affected by our age? He exists outside of time. So your age or my age is really not of importance to him. You never read in the Bible where he asks one, how old are you? He didn't ask the Old Testament saints how old they were. Moses, how old are you, Bo? Abraham, how old are you? You having a baby, and how old are you? Sarah, how old are you now? He never asked him that. Nor did he ask the disciples, how young are you guys? We don't read that. On the web. Hush, Siri. He's not going to say, my, how long you lived. He's not going to say, well said, Charlie. He's going to say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Now, when you think of well done, I think we've mentioned this before, what do you think of? A steak. Some people like their steak rare. Some people like their steak medium rare. Some people like their steak medium well. Some people like their steak well done. Using that as an analogy, when we get to heaven, will he say, rare, did you fulfill your purpose on earth? Medium rare, did you fulfill your purpose on earth? Medium well, did you fulfill your purpose on earth? Or, well done, thy good and faithful servant. Luke 12:48, say where you're at though. It says, from everyone who's been given much, much will be required. And to whom they entrusted much, of him they will ask all the more. You've been entrusted with 5, then more is expected of the 5. You've been entrusted with 2, less is expected of you than it is of the 5, but more than that of the 1. The more favor we've been entrusted with, the more we're expected to produce. Increase at least, multiplication, exponential multiplication ideally. Back to verses 24 through 40 here. It says, and the one who received the 1 talent came up and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man. Now this word hard is skleros in the Greek. It means tough, it means fierce, it means stubborn, it means unyielding. He won't budge. We know good and well you got a hard head, so to speak. It's the same word that Jesus used in John 6:60 when he gave the sermon about you shall eat my flesh and drink my blood. And he says, I know this is a hard saying. I know this is hard for you to understand. I know this is a lot for you to swallow. Luke uses the same word to describe what Jesus told Paul in Acts 9:5, and Paul reiterated it in his testimony in Acts 26:14. He says, it is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. You are so bullheaded, Saul. You are so bullheaded. Why do you kick against the pricks? Why do you heel wise recalcitrate, is what that means. Why do you keep kicking against these pricks? He says, I know you to be that kind of a man. If I make a suggestion to you, you ain't going to do it. You ain't going to blow me off. It may be the best suggestion, the most money-making idea for you, but if I suggest it, you such a hard-headed thing. That's what he's saying, basically, by using that word skleros. He says, you reap where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. In other words, you didn't lift a finger to help. You're reaping in the money, but you ain't lifting a finger to help. And he says, and I was afraid, and I went away and hid your talent in the ground. See, I have what is yours. Many will say this in that day. But his master answered and said to him, you wicked, lazy slave, you knew that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I scattered no seed. You know good and well I didn't lift a finger. Then you ought to have put my money in the bank, and on my arrival I would have received my money back with interest. Why did he hide the money and not put it in the bank? Anybody want to take a stab at it? Why did he hide the money and not put it in the bank? Obviously, the banks back then were not FDIC insured. So maybe he was a little leery of putting it in the bank. Maybe he had heard where there was some embezzlement at the bank. I don't know. But may I suggest this to you as a possible reason why he didn't put the money in the bank? Because if he put the money in the bank, there'd be a record of it. And he didn't want there to be a record of what he had. Is that the same reason why? I'm not saying it is, not being judgmental. But is that the same reason why some people put cash on an offering plate? To give the appearance that I'm tithing when I'm really not. Because after all, it's going to get mixed in with all the other money in here. Could that be why some people give? So when they're passing the plate, if the pastor's sitting up here and looking back, waiting to preach, and he can see that hand put something in the plate. Knowing good and well that you made $500 this week, and you put a 20 in that plate, and your tithe is supposed to be 50, and you put 20, to give the appearance. Could that be the reason? Just a suggestion. You notice the master did not correct the servant on his assessment. He did not argue with him. If anything, he agreed with him. He says, you know I'm a you know what. He did not correct the servant on his self-assessment, but he rather rebuked him of his wrong response to that assessment. He says, I'm not disagreeing with you that I'm a hard man. He says, but I want to talk to you and address your wrong response to that assessment. Your assessment was spot on, but your response to it is what I'm dealing with here. So he calls him a lazy in the King James. It says slothful. And that word in the Greek means to hesitate, shrinking backward because you're unready, reluctant, unwilling, unambitious, therefore you delay or even tardy. It's a vexation that comes from weary waiting. That's what that word means. Because you were already lazy, because you were already, you lacked the ambition to get out and do anything. You already had that issue in your heart before I even gave it to you. And it's reflected in the fact that you did nothing with the one talent that I gave you. So we ask, what commands, what expectations have we been hesitant to obey, reluctant to obey, or we've even blown them off, or we've stopped trying to fulfill them because we deem them as too difficult or impossible? Evidently, this guy figured, for me to go out and produce your expected added value back to it, that's too much to ask of me. That's too much to ask of me. It's so difficult for me to do that. I'm not able to do that. Here comes your whining. This is a loaded question when you consider Jesus' level of ministry and what he sent the disciples out to do in Matthew 10, 7 and 8. He says, as you go, go preach the gospel of the kingdom. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely you've received, freely give. He didn't say go hand out tracts. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. He didn't say go shake a few hands and invite him to come to our next meeting. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. He gave them greater expectations, and they did them. Instead of having a holy fear of his master, which in turn would have given him a correct sense of the weight and trust, the magnitude of the trust that has been entrusted to him, he basically said, your expectations are too high. That's too much of me to ask. But see, the faithful stewards, they made no such excuses. They went straight to work. Immediately they went to work. It says when the one with the 5, immediately he went out and traded and gained 5 more. He didn't waste any time. There was no hesitation. There was no procrastination. He immediately went to work, realizing you've entrusted me with something. Yes, you're a hard man. Yes, you're bullheaded, but you did entrust me with something. So I'm going to do something with it. He says, because he knew even though you're bullheaded, you're a trustworthy man. You're a man of your word. If you tell me you're going to do something, I know you're going to do it. You're a pain in the neck, yeah. But when you tell me you're going to pay me, I know good and well I'm going to get paid. When you tell me I'm going to pay overtime, I know good and well I'm going to get paid overtime. So therefore, he desired to please him, even though he's aggravating. If he had commanded him to do something, he surely figured, I'm up to the task. If he commanded me to do this, he surely must figure I'm up to the task. So he's entrusted with me. That's what entrusting is. I know you're up to the task. So when he gives us a responsibility, he gives us a gift, he says, I know you're up to it, or else I wouldn't have given it to you. And to some who are really up to it are given 5. Some who are up to it, given 2. Those who are somewhat up to it are given 1. By going out and being productive, they were acting like the master, the 5 and the 2, in that they were acting in his stead. In other words, they were trying to live up to his standard of productivity, maybe the way he did it before the business got as big as it was. Back in the early days when it was just you. This is how hard you worked, and you've told us stories back to good old days. How when you first started out in this plantation or is this business, you had to work so hard. And we know that that's the standard that you expect of those who work for you. The same way you used to do it. So they're going out with the same understanding, with the same level of productivity. And that's what he's conveying to his disciples. The same effort you see me put in ministry, Jesus says, I expect you to put the same effort into it. Because remember, the one with 2 went out and did likewise in the same manner as the one with 5. You may not have as much as the other, but you still put forth the same effort as the other. How much you're initially given was based on your previously demonstrated ability to handle it. But that doesn't change the fact that you still put forth the same exact effort, regardless of whether you're given 5, 2, or 1. You still go out to increase it. Where the unfaithful one and the unfaithful today really go wrong is in deeming the task too hard for them. And in deeming the task too hard for them, you question the wisdom of the master in assigning it to you. Because again, he assigned it to you because he knew you were up to it. So for you not to do anything with it, though you're up to it, you're questioning his judgment in giving it to you to begin with. So the Father finds that as an insult. If you're given a talent, you're expected to use it. If you don't, then you're questioning the judgment and wisdom of the one who gave it to you and entrusted you with it. Whatever ability, whatever you've been entrusted with, even your finances, he's expecting you to do something with it. Ignoring God while pretending to serve him, that is religion in a nutshell. That's my definition of religion in a nutshell. I'm not saying I came up with it. I'm saying I agree wholeheartedly. Pretending, blowing him off, ignoring what God said to do, and pretending to serve him in the meantime, that is religion. It says, therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to the one who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has more, for everyone who has, more shall be given, and he will have an abundance. From the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. Throw out the worthless slave into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Whatever you have, if you do something with it, more will be given to you. As it was with the 5, as it was with the 2. But if you are given and entrusted with something, and you don't do anything with it, and in observation, the master finds out you didn't do anything with it, then what you have will be taken away. And people are wondering, I don't know why I lost my job. Well, you weren't a timely, effective, efficient steward of what you knew to be another man's resources for the purpose for which it was assigned to you, and you didn't bother producing the expected added value back to that position to present back to the boss upon inspection. And you wonder why. Now, as I was teaching this in another Bible study on Friday morning, as I was teaching it, every time you teach it, you get something you never got before. Okay? The one who had the 5 talents, he was given 5 more, right? So now how many does he have? 10. The one who had the 2 talents, he produced 2 more. Now he has what? 4. So when the master comes and sees those who did something with what they were given, the master doesn't see 5 and 2. The master sees 10 and 4. 10 and 4. 10-4. You see where I'm headed? What does 10-4 mean? 10-4. What does 10-4 mean? It means message received and understood. And that's what Holy Spirit spoke to me the last time I taught this. Policemen, firemen, others, agencies get together on the CB, get together on the walkie-talkie, get together on their comms, get together on the phone, and they're given instructions and they say 10-4. Message received and understood. So when this master came back, he saw 10-4. They received the message and they understood it. Isn't that amazing? Talking to the servant who did nothing with the 1 talent, cast into a relative outer darkness. There's no mention of a furnace of fire, so therefore we can safely deduce it's not outside the camp. It's outside the gate. Those who didn't steward well what you were given, rewards in heaven. It's that place of far less rewards, reserved for only those who proved less diligent than the faithful, the good and faithful servants who stewarded well what they were entrusted with. Now, before we finish, and I'll stop here for tonight, maybe a couple of minutes early, but that's okay, because this is a good stopping point. What is a talent? In this parable, a talent is a sum of money. Most likely it was a silver talent. And a silver talent was worth 10,000 denarii. A denarius was 1 day's wage. Everybody knows that. One silver talent that was given to the one with one. He was given 10,000 denarii. Denarius, if a coin, he was given 10,000 of them in a bag. 10,000 denarii. Now, a denarius was 1 day's wage, and the average number of work days in a year, because remember they had a 354-day lunar calendar, we have a 365-day solar calendar. But the average number of work days back then was 300 work days, because you took the Sabbath off. Then you had a festival days. So the average number of work days was 300. Okay? You take 10,000, divide it by 300, you get 33 and a third. Let's just round it down to 33. Most young boys would go and start learning the trade of their father, working with him on the farm at the age of 12. And they would do it for 5 years till they were the age 17. At the age of 17, they were now eligible to either run the father's business, because now they're no longer called a child, they're called a weos, a son, in whom I'm well pleased. A father would even announce that. That didn't originate with God. I'm talking about with him saying it. It was already a phrase that was said, hey, look at my 17-year-old here. This is my beloved son. I'm very proud of my boy. Very proud of my boy. He's letting him know that dude at the general store, shopkeeper, if my son, who's now 17, comes in and gets some stuff, let him use his signet ring and buy it with my ring and then send me the bill. So at 17, you entered into the workforce. And at age 50 was the typical retirement age back in that day. Because life expectancy back then was like 50 to 65. It had gone down considerably from Methuselah. So roughly 33 years and some change was the average time in which someone worked from the age 17 until the point of retirement at the age 50. The point being is this. The one with the one talent was given a lifetime's worth of wages. How would you have felt if at the age of 17 you were told or you were asked, okay, what do you want to do as a career? Okay. Well, the average salary for that position is $80,000 a year. So I'm going to give you $80,000 times 33 and give it to you all at once. That's what was happening here. So even the one with one, we look down and say, well, he was given 5. He was given 2. But the one given 1 was given a lifetime's worth of wages. Now that being a silver talent, 10,000 denarii. A gold talent is 10 times that much. It doesn't say whether it's silver or gold. But we're going to assume common silver because silver was typically the metal used in coins. That's why we're going with silver. Okay? So stop and think about that. This one who had the one, yeah, we focused on how he did nothing with it. But may we put a little positive spin on it in going back to the beginning. It didn't end well, but let's look at him from the beginning. He had a previously demonstrated ability, and therefore he was entrusted with a lifetime's worth of wages to start with. Then, having been given it all, he decided to do nothing with it. Yet the one with the 2 worked just as diligently as the one with the 5, because it says in the same manner. he went out and traded. To them, the 5 and the 2 both were told the exact same phrase. Well done, thy good and faithful servant. So it doesn't matter whether you had the 2 and here on earth you've been looking up at the one with the 5, or whether you're one with the 5 and you've been looking down at the one with the 2. If you both work just as diligently, you get the same reward. So, myself, Pastor Brian, over a congregation this size, and yet you see the pastors of these mega churches. We don't look at it from the standpoint of, I pastored this number, he pastors that number. We look at it from the standpoint, if we put forth the same effort in shepherding the sheep of this fold as that one does of that fold, we get the exact same reward in heaven. Because God is not moved by numbers. He is concerned about the numbers when he starts to see, did you have any increase to present to me as good stewards? Did you increase at least? Did you multiply? Or ideally, did you exponentially multiply that which I gave you? Now, next week, we'll pick up with this, ask a couple of questions along these lines, and we will show you in the Word. Whereas they were given a sum of money, there are some intangibles that we're entrusted with, that we are to likewise steward just as well. Amen?